Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries, with host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Denny Weinberg. Jesus told us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we'll examine what's happening in our world and how it points to the end and his soon return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is End Times Friday, and this is part 2 with our good friend, Rabbi Ephraim from Jerusalem, who's now actually on a little bit of a holiday, as long as he's got some work to do over in Toronto. And we talked last session, if you haven't listened to it, is even there's a lot of anti-Semitism and a lot of things that are causing concern for the Jewish community there because of the irrationality of it. We had a good discussion about the spiritual nature of it, is that we know that the enemy, because of Israel's special place with God, always wants to eliminate it, literally eliminate it. And so it's a spirit. When there's so much irrationality, there's a spiritual reason behind it, and we can see it. So we want to, talk a little bit about that, today, about the spiritual temperature in Israel, Rabbi. But given we know right now when we're taping this is that U.S., assented to by Israel and signed by Iran was a memorandum of understanding, it called an MOU, that was, okay, ceasefire, open up the straits, and let's discuss how to, have Iran not develop a nuclear weapon and rebuild their economy and keep some, sanity over there. Everybody signed it. Interesting enough, you and Eric said, you doubt that it'll be honored because you've never seen Iran honor anything. And so you said, this ain't going to make it. That happened. They violated it. Trump said, and remember, we always listen to the comments. He said, Iran is desperate to make a deal with us. And so therefore they signed it. We're going to get all this done. And then 2 weeks later, it's they're liars, cheaters, and you can't trust them. So the heck with it. We're just going to go bomb them again. So they are. We've had 10 consecutive days of bombing. From your perspective, what is the status right now of that war? What's happening? What do you think is going to happen? And of course, and Denny made this comment in our discussion. From our perspective, we don't even hear any input from Israel. It's almost like they're silent about all this. So what's your perspective about all this?
Yeah. So like you said, we're completely not surprised that the MOU fell apart. I have to say that the only thing that slightly surprised me was I thought it would last more than a day or two. I was a little surprised that they would start bombing, that Iran would start bombing. I think it was 24 hours, 48 hours after the signing of the MOU.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because how do you put your head into their headspace? Like, what are these people thinking?
Yeah.
And when you have no idea how is that good for them? How is that good for them? Even with their, messianic, that they want to destroy the world and bring, Islam to take over the world. Even with all that, you would think that they should say, let's take advantage of the MOU and rebuild our nuclear capabilities under the noses of the Americans and pretend we're cooperating, and rebuild our air defenses. Look, why not do that? But they just blow the thing up because, I don't know, they're so enthusiastic to show that we're the winners. And I don't know, I can't really quite understand that. But it does demonstrate really clearly what Israel has known through very bitter experience, is that Islamic fundamentalists you cannot reason with. They do not want peace and prosperity. It's just not a goal. It's not a value. They want to destroy the West. They want to destroy the United States. They want to destroy freedom. They want to destroy other religions. And that's what they're out for. And their word means absolutely nothing. It was the exact same thing with Hamas. Hamas, when we supposedly came to a ceasefire in the 2-year war after October 7th, they said we will disarm and we will, cooperate and we'll create. And then a day later, we're not disarming. They signed a document. We're not disarming, we're not withdrawing, and they've done everything to reinforce their power since then. So same thing with Hezbollah. We'll withdraw, we won't fire, and then they immediately start to regroup and re-engage and build up there. So where is this going to go? Well, where it's not going to go is there's no document at the present point or agreement that can be negotiated in my opinion. So it's only if they are so completely completely smashed to smithereens militarily, that they have no choice, or that it creates a rebellion, or economically starved so much that it creates sort of an internal rebellion, because the present leadership will stop at nothing. They may fake it for a while, like they looked like they were going to do, but they're not. And their intentions are still the same. Their efforts are still the same. And there will be no security through any written type of agreement.
Is Israel
Oh, right.
right
Israel's
at the
part.
moment? Are they not joining the fight because either they haven't been asked to, or the only way they'll do it is if they get attacked? Because I did see a interesting article that, and they were a little bit surprised at this, as they said the question was, why hasn't Iran? Because they've attacked their neighbors, interesting enough, but they haven't attacked Israel.
Right.
And the comment was, because they know if they poke the bear, they're going to come with big force against them. So they're even purposely not bringing you into it, because they don't want your firepower against them. So
Right.
Is Israel?
It is a bit surprising that they haven't attacked us. Again, it's really hard to understand, because in the past, although it seems crazy for them to poke the bear, because they know Israel's retaliation will be very severe together with the United States. But on the other hand, they want to bring Israel in, because then the American public blames the whole war on Israel.
Yeah.
And then the pressure grows very strongly against Trump to end the war, because you're only doing the war because of Israel.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So that explains, I believe, why Israel is presently refraining from joining the United States, because we don't want to be perceived as being the ones that are causing this war. So as long as the United States is managing by itself and is not calling upon us to support them, I think it's better for the United States' effort that we stay out. And also, we prefer not getting hundreds of missiles falling on our civilians. It's very, very, very disruptive and dangerous for us. So we don't want to start that unless we really have to. And I should add, I think maybe Israel's enthusiasm, I don't think this is decisive. I think Israel would support the United States in any case, but I think our enthusiasm has been a little dampened by a feeling of sort of ingratitude, that even though I believe we were such a good supportive ally for the United States in this war, and providing, so much backup and firepower, and, using Israel as a base for the air forces, and, risked lives. We were really so supportive. And then as soon as the war ends, first of all, we're sort of blamed for the war, even though we're supporting the United States' campaign. I mean, it's obviously for both of our benefits, but then we get blamed for it by the American public. And then Trump turns around like the day later and sort of, disses Israel with like, get out of Hezbollah, get out of Syria, which hello, welcome to our neighborhood. Who are these people we're dealing with? You see who you're dealing with. They want to kill us. They want to drive us into the sea. They're very clear about it. They're irrational Muslim fundamentalists. They say they want to destroy us all. You see, you're fighting the same battle. And now you just casually say Israel should just pull out and then abandon the whole northern part of Israel, let our civilians be subjected to thousands of drones and missiles and terrorist infiltrations like October 7th, which they want to do. So that's a bit disheartening that comes from Trump, the president, right after we were such a great supportive ally, especially, keeping in mind how much support the United States got from the rest of the world, which was virtually none. And we're out there spending billions of dollars on military support in this war as America's ally. And then we get dissed. But again, I don't think that is really the reason we're not joining. But I think it certainly gives the Israeli public a little bit less enthusiasm.
Yeah. Do you, given the current status of things, do you believe that the straits, will be opened up again? And do you think that the U.S. will go after looks like the nuclear stuff that's going on still there under Pickaxe Mountain? Would you think they'll go after that?
I do think so. I'm no expert. I have no inside information, but I just can't see any scenario where Iran will just throw up its hands and let the straits be reopened for any extended period of time. Again, they'll do, they might, say we'll do it, and then back off a week later, a day later, a month later, 2 months later. But I can't see any type of stable is sort of a surrender by Iran. And same thing with their nuclear capabilities. They're going to do everything possible to rebuild their nuclear capabilities, and negotiations and agreements aren't going to stop that. So either the United States keeps bombing, or does whatever they can do to promote regime change, or it's still cat and mouse going back and forth, forever.
Yeah, there's a line of reasoning that's that Iran does not have central command of anything anymore. That was gone a long time ago, and that the war is being waged by basically a decentralized playbook of some kind, with tens of thousands of mercenaries who have their own armaments and their own instructions for just this situation, but that it's not coordinated. And that's why, and as a result, we assume that there's a big strategic plan afoot here, as opposed to just random acts. And it also says why you can't negotiate your way out of this. There's nobody to talk to. And part of this is that the current leader is either so incapacitated or dead or living, outside the country. Is that part of the thinking in Israel at all?
Yeah, or that it's being run by the IRGC, but it's basically like militarily being run, and they just want to stay in power and grab all the money that they can.
But is there a belief that they're in communication with each other, or has all of that infrastructure been decimated? Could there really be a command and control mechanism still in place there?
Perhaps not. What I understood was that there's sort of like there's instructions that have been given across the board that if this happens, this is what you do, and this is what we expect of you when, in different situations. But, who knows what local people can do, and it's a huge country. And probably the more they are economically challenged, the more there will be different groups breaking off and rebelling and doing their own thing and having their own goals. So yeah, it's definitely, there's a lot of chaos going on over there.
Yeah. As we, and part of our purpose is to look at things spiritually, particularly as we look at the end. And because of what we know the Bible talks about Israel exists. Israel is a key part of the end times, which means it's not decimated. It's not eliminated, which we know Iran would like to do. And particularly if they have a nuclear weapon, they could do it. So we go backwards with it. And that would be, since they aren't destroyed, Iran never is able to exercise the nuclear option. And, how that impacts, and we do know the whole world comes against Israel, including the United States, ultimately. So that's how we look at it, Rabbi. And, given that, when we think of the spiritual dynamic of everything, what's the spiritual temperature there in Israel? And then is the conversation, amongst Christians here in America, we do talk about the end, and we see Israel and what happens in Israel kind of being critical piece of defining, ultimately where is it headed. And because what's happening, we think, maybe we're closer than we think to the end. Is that discussion going on in Israel? What's the spiritual temperature in Israel?
Yeah, well, when Israel and when Jews get challenged and attacked, it strengthens us. It gives us a lot of sense of purpose. So Israel, I feel, is getting stronger through this process, and support by Jews of Israel is getting stronger. I think religious Jews feel like, this is the playbook. We knew this was coming. We can sort of see how it will happen. The gathering of all the nations of the world against Israel. A couple years ago, it was hard to see how that would happen with the United States.
Yeah.
But now we have the Democratic Party, DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, Mamdani, they are very quickly taking over the Democratic Party, and no one's doing anything to push back on them. No one seems in the Democratic Party really even talking about it, so.
This would be a separate discussion, but not for this time. But hey, Denny, sometime let's take that specific thing, because here's a question. There is a gigantic Jewish population in New York City.
Yes.
This is Eric. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but in the last, week, he's come out and talked about arresting Netanyahu, if he ever comes to New York City, and the only comment was that, wait a second, you're putting your position on Israel way above your role as a mayor of New York City. And so the question is, let's talk about that. And I'm not talking about doing that today, but I just want to raise a question of what is the response of the Jewish population in New York City about somebody who's openly anti-Jewish? And we don't have to go into that, but Denny, I know you can do some research, and we can, Rabbi, when we have you back on, we'll just have that conversation, because you experienced it all around the world, and we can see it firsthand, which is, like you said, at some point, the American support of Israel wanes, and there's signals to that already, and the potential of it could be even more dramatic. But Netanyahu came out and said, I think we need to wean ourselves off of the United States support, which indicates that. So we'll come back to that. But, what is being discussed, and spiritually, how do the people in Israel view the dynamics of what's happening, and are they seeing the spiritual element of it? And then do they think that, maybe this could be heading toward the end?
Yeah. I think people do feel that. We see really clearly as Israelis how irrational this hatred is, and how irrational it is that it's so popular all across the world. The fact that the UN votes against Israel and condemns Israel more than any other country in the world, when we're a liberal democracy, and they ignore all the tyrants and human rights abuses, which are far, far, far worse than Israel on its worst day could possibly imagine, even towards the Palestinians. So we see the irrationality, and it's hard not to say, oh, well, this is leading somewhere. This must be a God-driven process. We also, as religious Jews, not a lot of Israel is not religious, but those of us who are religious, we see history in a 6,000-year cycle. And the year in the Jewish calendar is something like 5780 or something. So we see the coming of the Messiah. This has been our tradition since the beginning of Judaism, for close to 4,000 years, that history as we know it is going to be 6,000 years. And so we're a couple hundred years away from that, and it can happen anytime before that, but that's the deadline. So this process is leading to the coming of the Messiah as we believe it. And along with the coming of the Messiah will be a respect for the Jewish people and the return of the Jews to the land of Israel in its entirety. So we see community after community around the world getting kicked out. All the Jews were kicked out of the Arab countries in the 50s. Then Russian Jewry emptied out in the 70s. Iranian Jewry was emptied out in the 70s. France, the anti-Semitism has gone so high that tons of Jews are leaving there. And now the United States and Canada is the start of the process. So that's the ingathering of the exiles, which was prophesied from the beginning of time, and which is supposed to lead up to the coming of the Messiah. And, we always hope that it will be a more positive process. We believed, according to our tradition, that the Messiah will come for one of two reasons. Either there will be so much persecution and the world will put itself into some state of Gog and Magog world war with such mass destruction that at the end of all of that, the world will sort of wake up and say, look what we've done to ourselves, and the Messiah will come. Or the world and the Jewish people get its act together and just decides on its own on what the right way to live is and what the spiritual truth is, and that will bring the Messiah. Generally, humanity hasn't taken the positive road, the Jewish people included, and it's usually through destruction that we wake up and things happen. Like the return of the Jews to Israel in 1948 to create a state was after the Holocaust. So, and Russian Jews leave because of persecution, and Jews from Arab countries, 600,000 Jews were kicked out of Arab countries, and most of them came to Israel. So that potentially could happen with the United States and Canada. But we do see it all part of a spiritual process leading towards the end of days and the coming of the Messiah. And we look forward to that, but we hope it happens through a peaceful, positive process and not the alternative.
Rabbi, this affects Israeli immigration policy a lot. So just quickly, when quote exiles or Jews and their families living in other countries want to come to Israel, describe how that works.
Okay. So Israel has a unique law in its books because of Israel's role as being created to be a refuge for Jews who get persecuted, because this has been such a consistent thing in our history, that part of Israel's purpose is to protect Jews that get persecuted outside of Israel. That which we did not have in the last 2,000 years. So anytime Jews were persecuted and killed and butchered, they had nowhere to go. like in the Holocaust. So Israel instituted one of its first important laws after becoming a state. They created something called the Law of Return, which basically says that any Jew anywhere can get automatic citizenship, is automatically allowed to be a citizen of Israel. There are a few exceptions, like if you're a nasty criminal or if some country wants to what do you call, like take you out to bring you to trial or something like that. So there are a few exceptions, but in general,
Extradition.
it's the automatic. And it's still a bit of a lengthy bureaucratic process, but at the end of the lengthy bureaucratic process, it's automatic. So people are taking advantage of that, and a lot of people are buying apartments just in case apartments. So yeah, so that's the story.
And the term we heard is called Aliyah.
Aliyah, yeah.
Is that the return of Jews to Israel?
Yeah, Aliyah means literally to go up, but it's the common term for emigrating to Israel, because we consider moving to Israel as a spiritual ascension. The land of Israel is on a higher spiritual level than any other country. So moving to Israel is to go up.
It's the same term. Isn't it the same term that's used for a prayer before and after the Torah is read?
Aliyah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When you're called up to the Torah to make a blessing when the Torah is publicly read on the Sabbath, then it's called an Aliyah, because same thing, you're going up to the Torah.
Yeah.
Very good.
And I'm actually part of, some Christian organizations that we purposely fund the travel expenses for the return of the Jew to Israel. And once they get there, my understanding is the Jewish government, now gives them a whole package of integration of now that you're here, we're going to help you get settled, and you're going to get your work, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we are actually facilitating that, Denny, to get there. And then once they're there, once they're there, I know the government really has a beautiful program to help them, they're not just immigrants that just, take money from the government. They have to actually get into the system. And, it's really amazing, really, how you guys do it. Let me ask you a couple. This is a couple practical, simple questions about the end. As you look at it, because your theology obviously is from the Old Testament. Do you or any of the Jewish scholars, do they study anything like Revelation, which should be a New Testament book, but it describes a lot of what the end is like? Do they spend any time looking at that?
Not the book of Revelation per se, but we have our own prophecies in the Old Testament and the prophets that describe the coming of the Messiah, as well as Kabbalah. There's a lot of references, and some people study them. It's not considered like core study, because our basic approach is it's interesting. It's really cool to watch it happen in front of our eyes, but it's not central, and we don't really know when it's going to happen. So, we don't spend a whole lot of time dwelling on the subject. Our job is to make ourselves as good people as we possibly can, and help our community as much as we can, and help the world as much as we can. That's our job. Figuring out when and if and how the Messiah will come and the end of days we leave that in God's hands.
Yeah. And is there another question is there any open discussion or willingness to have open discussion as you describe, what the Testament says from our New Testament perspective? See, we believe Jesus was the Messiah and that he returns and then does all the things that you've just described as what the Messiah does. And that is Israel. See, we have in the New Testament called the Battle of Armageddon, where they line up to destroy Israel. And basically the reason, and there's 200 million people from Gog and Magog assemble, and the reason, warriors, is that they can't win by technology. And because they can't win by technology, because you have superiority, they just decide, you know what, let's just come against them with all of our people. They can't possibly handle just us marching across and killing them all with 200 million people. And that's when Christ returns and sets up what we call the new world government in Israel. And it starts the whole life again of what God originally intended was for Israel to be, the nation that rules the earth. And he does it with, the Messiah. Anyway, is there ever any openness to that kind of discussion, or is it just, no, that's old New Testament stuff. We don't deal with that. And how do you look at any of that?
So everything is, we sort of buy into everything except, sort of say, the Jesus part. If he turns out to be the Messiah, then we'll say hello and say, okay, we got it wrong for a while. But that's not a part of our tradition. And our tradition does not talk about a second coming. So we're just waiting for the Messiah. Whoever he'll be, we'll know then.
Yeah.
Same type of attitude. But we do sort of expect. By the way, did you know that the word Armageddon comes from the Hebrew Har Megiddo, which is the Mount of Megiddo, which is a place in Israel that when you come, you can visit. It's one of the oldest cities, like I'm talking thousands of years in Israel. It was a major capital on a crossroads in the Galilee, and it's an excavation that has revealed 22 layers of civilization over the many years. But that's where Armageddon comes from. Har Megiddo means the mount of the city called Megiddo.
And
So
we
I
know
can see-
I visited the valley of Megiddo, and you can stand there and look at it and say, yeah, I can see how 200 million soldiers could gather there. It's big enough.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Denny, have any final comments? Or
It's fascinating, the question that you just asked, and Ephraim, your response. When people say politically, Israel's not the problem, the United States is the problem to this Islamic radical movement, and Israel's just the little Satan, the big Satan. But I think there's also a sense among believing Christians that anti-Semitism will not end there. The next annihilation after that will be the Christians. And so, and I know there are Christians that live in Israel, and there's probably people like me that are Christians, but are also Jewish, in some way. Is that a welcome combination, Jews and Christians living in Israel?
Yeah, totally. There's tons of Christian Arabs living in Israel that have been Christian and living in Israel for hundreds of years, and their rights are completely respected. Their churches are respected and protected. The only places where it's not true is in areas where Israel gave over to the Palestinian Authority in around the year 2000. So wherever that happened, the Muslim Palestinian Authority began a lot of persecution against Christians everywhere. I mean, Christians were persecuted by Muslims long before Israel started. A friend of mine who was a Christian Arab living in the old city told me that until the creation of the state, Christians were hated by Muslims in Israel much more than Jews were hated. But after the creation of the state, Jews got the favored position. But the Christians are still persecuted, and as a result, like places like Bethlehem, which used to have a majority Christian population, and the mayor used to frequently be Christian, and most of the city council would be majority Christian. And now it's a tiny minority because they have been persecuted out and they've just fled from the land because of the Muslim persecution, which, by the way, is like hardly talked about because the Christian leaders in those areas feel very threatened. So they take the party line of the people who are ruling over them, which is the Muslims, who will, come and kill them if they speak out against them. So they don't bring this to the attention of Christians or the world. And of course, the news ignores it. It's all there for anyone who wants to do even the tiniest bit of research. But it's a quiet subject. And it's not just Israel. Christians, as I'm sure you're aware, are being persecuted in just about every Muslim country that exists.
Yeah.
And it's not talked about very much.
Well, Rabbi, thank you so much for giving us your perspective on that. And we look forward to more discussion about it. And it's very informative that, you can, state, truth. And thank you for all that. We, pray for your enjoyment there in Toronto with your family. And the only final question I have is, you said you wear a baseball cap. What team do you have on your cap?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question because it might have been the Toronto Blue Jays in the past. My family has had season tickets to the Blue Jays for decades, but I have because of all this anti-Semitism and the changes in Canada, I have zero Canadian patriotism anymore.
Yeah.
Usually Jews are still patriotic to the countries that they come from, but I do not feel any sentimental attachment to this country anymore, unfortunately. It's just not the country I grew up in. Don't really recognize it. So not Blue Jays. So I'll just tell you, I wore a baseball cap once into an anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian rally in Manhattan to hide myself. So I would go in and just observe what was going on, take some pictures. And after, when I got on the subway, I looked at the baseball cap and it had a giant Star of David on it, and I thought I was going undercover, and I completely forgot.
Whoopsie daisy.
Yeah, so I just wear a neutral baseball cap these days.
Now
it's soccer. World Cup.
I'll send you a Colorado Rockies hat. Then
that'd be nice.
We're at the bottom of the league, so nobody will care about that. So have a great trip, and thank you so much for doing it. And if you have questions that you'd love to ask Rabbi, just send them in at questions@abideministry.com, and we'll pass it on, and we'll keep this discussion going. So we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and we'll catch up. But thank you for your time and taking time out of your vacation. Hope you have a good one. See you later. See you, Denny.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.